Panzers in the snow. Well, that's definitely what's happening here. We are out near Kherson. Here is in the news currently in the current war with Russia, between Russia and Ukraine. Mentioning that, I think I've mentioned it in some other videos, but want to continue to push out my new YouTube channel focusing on international world, whatever you want to call them, crises, including the Ukraine war, which is of course a major focus right now. And it's called Crisis Report. I'll try to remember to put a link in the description below if you want to get both. I have people that send me information, as well as I'm finding it, as well. So information updates as well as my analysis of what is going on. So we're going to, I'm going to push up this way towards here. Is decided instead of, I wasn't going to try to fight out there, but let's just see what's going on here. So we're going to come, oh, okay, bit in the way. Okay. I did see him, I thought he was over here. I knew he fired at me. Got up on the hill here and fired last turn. Okay, no. Counter battery fire. Okay, that's actually gonna be good. Okay, so that will give me an overrun capability. Now I want to come out here and ooh, that's what I wanted. I didn't know they were all there. Okay, I knew he had retreated back somewhere here. Oh, hey, let's go up on the hill. He's now in the woods. Yeah, I think this Doug will move there. I know he's sitting on the river, but we can take him out. That would be nice. They can get there on foot, can't they? They'll be in the woods with backup of armor. What I want to do here is reinforce him. That will work. Let's move you up the hill. Okay, I was wondering if there was an anti-tank. Oh, well, he can go here now. Oh, there is him over there, but not maybe quite as good as I was hoping, but I should have attacked here first. These guys here. Wrong, coming up this way. Okay, we'll get down. We moved up. Okay, take it further. They've shot, I know. It's maybe seeing some infantry movement here. Pretty heavily armored. These guys aren't. Yeah, oh, wait a minute, come here. Oh, now I should have done that. Well, you live, you learn. Okay. Mainly thinking of getting him up here next turn when these guys move down. There. Just sort of protecting the flank in case something comes that way. Okay. All right. This, like I say, you live, you learn. Not move anywhere because of the river penalty. Devastating blow like that. You didn't quite get a nice overrun, but that'd be yeah, that would work, I think. Alright, so what I want to do is hit that with an overrun. Then fill in. Let's look, what would AT mode now? Not any better, so we're going to stay in artillery mode. Okay, not like perfect, but rather effective, I would say. Right, come up here. Hit them like that. They're backed up with did they attack? I guess they must have. Okay. Damn, I don't think we want to go swinging way wide like that. Yep, I guess we will swing there. They can't get there. Well, you can move to there. This guy can come to here. It circles him and puts him down a bit harder. Okay, well, oh well, they can fire here now. Next turn we'll see if we can cross that. No, we're not bringing him up. Our artillery, I believe, is fired. Down with that, and he's cut off and it tries to escape the pocket. At the edges of it. Damn, forgot about him up there. Okay, well, that is not the most helpful, but I think this will work. Could have used him to attack into the town, but like I see here, I didn't really think there would be much of a issue. Clear the town, get across. Okay, he can come up to here. So, wood. Gotta keep unit cohesion, but we got, well, we may have more things to do than just make it to here by the end of 21 turns. There, so these guys can come to here. I'm going to reinforce you. And these guys can get down to the far side of the river. To be able to move off next turn. Okay, he could move up, but we'll... yeah, it's expensive, but... oh. He's getting attacked over here. Okay, well... damn. That sucks. I had pushed a little bit more there. Okay. I have nothing but bad news to report, my general. After surveying the area and reconnecting with the 11th Corps Command, we passed all our battlefield intelligence off to them. What is left of them, General Steinerman, commander of the 11th Corps, is dead, killed by an anti-tank fire. Before he died, he successfully re-established contact with forces outside the pocket. Field Marshal Monstein is now aware of details of our situation and is expected to hear from him immediately on our next course of action. There's another piece of bad news. It's actually an intercept of enemy communications. A description of the battle by a Soviet officer concerns the missing 42nd Corps. Brace yourself, it is not pleasant. Written transcript of oral description of the Etacom of Los Angeles. It was during that night, or evening before, that the encircled Germans, having abandoned all hope of ever being rescued by Hubei, decided to make one last desperate effort to break out. Driven out of their warm huts they had abandoned in Sandervoska, they flocked into ravines near the village, when then in a desperate decision to break through the enemy in the morning, so that the morning formed themselves into two marching columns of about 14,000 men each. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning. Our tanks and our cavalry suddenly appeared and rushed straight into them, thick of the two columns, and happened then is hard to describe. Reading this badly, it's badly written, I'm not sure. The Germans ran in all directions, and for the next 4 hours our tanks raced up and down the plain, crushing them by the hundreds. Our cavalry, and competing with the tanks, chased them through the ravines, where it is hard for tanks to pursue them. Most of the time the tanks were not using their guns, lest they hit their own cavalry. Hundreds and hundreds of the cavalry were hacking at them with sabers, and massacred the Fritzes as no one had ever seen or never been massacred by cavalry before. There was no time to take prisoners. It was the kind of carnage that nothing could stop until it was all over. In a small area, over 20,000 Germans were killed. Major Kampov, Red Army officer of the 1st Ukrainian Front. Kherson, right. Okay, end the briefing. All right, well, we made it out. A lot of others didn't. Yeah, this is just, stupidity of, primarily, I would say, Hitler. Obviously, other generals, for various reasons, are culpable in actions like this. I do actually see relatively smart generalship going on with the Russians right now, with their abandonment of Kherson city and the territory north of the Dnieper that they had captured. And possibly other near future fallbacks in that region, preparing that winter may be coming, and they don't want, well, whether the Ukrainians would slaughter so many or just simply take them prisoner, cold, starving men kind of thing, that may be happening, that the Germans just didn't, just didn't have the capabilities. Because, okay, if there were two columns of 14,000 men each, that would be 28,000 men, and if 20,000 were killed, that would mean 8,000 got out. Now, of course, others would have just marched off into the snow and probably died before, even uninjured would have died before, they got to friendly lines or whatever. It is because of logistics failures. I'm not going to say whatever German capabilities they had, but according to the, if that description is all accurate, and I'm granting that it is, they were in such a poor state of either lack of fuel or lack of animals to be able to tow their anti-tank guns and artillery and whatever else. So they were no longer a fighting force. They weren't yet a mob until the attack happened. They were still a disciplined retreat. And so it's the inability of logistics movements. And I've often thought of, like, obviously through this game, unrealistic, I'll readily say it, elite force that is well supplied. And we can see here that, and again, this is, an entry level, not terribly realistic war game. It is a war game, most assuredly. It's not just a game that's about war. It is a war game. Look at the interactions of types of units and combat and whatnot. If you were to, say, translate this from what this is over to uh, the Ardennes offensive game. Boy, I'm blanking on the name. I guess regular viewers know. For some reason, I blank on names. Well, whatever. Well, let me got the stuff right here. Hold on, just a second. Decisive campaigns. That's what I'm looking for. Ardennes offensive. If you were to convert that in, all the starting situation here, and I probably could have. I don't know that it would have changed the end of this, but I could have pushed into the town. I think because these are such well-formed units and whatnot. But if we were to convert the status of all of these units into that game, we can see how well equipped, well trained units, and sure, these are all elites, so yeah, okay, maybe instead of 5 stars, 3 stars or something like that, but well supplied, well equipped units with what they're calling heroes, but key personnel that have, above average skill sets, shall we say, in various things. That a smaller dynamic force can take on and defeat larger forces. So, that those 2 columns is already way too late, but okay, you have approximately 30,000 men in that pocket. Now, radios are, even still to this day, are not, 100% functioning at all times, but they've gotten a lot better than here. Whatever the 30,000 men, which sometimes it varies from army to army, but a division is generally somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 men, and 20,000 is getting to your upper limit. So we could easily say if that could be 3 divisions there. None of them had effective radios, and they definitely had big radios that you could set up and could communicate around for longer distances, but they did not have a radio set up to communicate with Hubei or whoever, higher commands, to know what's going on, to know, hold on, okay, we've got 30,000 men, we've got Kampfgruppe whatever, it's going to show up, can you hold that, it's going to take 3, tell them honestly, it's going to take 3 days or whatever the time is for them to get there, and we'll update you daily on their progress. So if it's going to take an extra day, or if we're going to get there early, you'll know how it's going. And that they didn't have that set up, and of course, the Germans heavily were relying upon, and the Americans too, but heavily relying upon field telephones. The Americans also use field telephones for multiple reasons. The Germans very much knew and did. That's the little Kettenkrad, the little half-track motorcycle thing. One of the main functions that was used up until late in the war. And I've only recently learned this a year or 2 ago, but they often had those either with a trailer or just on the back, where the possible to put 2 persons, is a big spool of field telephone wire, and those were designed to sort of buzz across the countryside, whether it's snowy or not, and laying wire, because you don't necessarily want to lay it near the roads where it might get accidentally cut or on purpose cut, but you also want to go in the straightest line, so you want to weave through a forest instead of going around it that you would with a truck or something larger, but one of those things you could, get, I know this is a swamp here or whatever, but get through one of these forests, just go straight, weave, more or less straight line, but go through it, that you just run the field telephone. So that's pretty cool and good operations. But whether by accident or enemy operations, those are getting cut, and they are fixed to the point that it's coming to here, not Coruscant, but or is it Coruscant? No, Coruscant, where that motorcycle unit was. They may be, until this gets cut off and whatnot in there, they may be having field telephone communications to here. But they're going, they're hearing, General, this is, Lieutenant whatever of the reconnaissance, motorcycle reconnaissance unit. Our general left to go make, go make contact with higher command. No, he's been gone for 2 days or 3 days or whatever. I have no words for you. I have no other information than that. You can keep calling every day or every hour, just to see if there's any updates, if we got any new information, and also just sort of checking to see that the phone lines are working or not. Yeah, sure, but once this position is whether totally abandoned or partially abandoned, well, that landline is no longer, terribly useful. I mean, not that it has no use, gives you somebody to chat with while the enemy is bombarding you or something, but beyond that, it isn't terribly useful. So, and the U.S. did use lots of field telephones, partially just because of communication bandwidth and the ability to talk directly with particular, we'll call them offices, the supply office, the personnel office, the intelligence office, the G1, G2, whatever, those kinds of, who are you talking to? Like, I've got some prisoners. Do you want them? To interview, and who are they? Well, they're a captain and a major. Oh, yes, we want them. Are there 4 privates? No, we don't need them. So they're that you can get on, and there's operators with hook the plug in and unplug, the old style field operators that would hook you to offices where a lot of the field units, and I believe most of the whether it's the backpack radios, the handheld walkie-talkie type radios, those have crystals in them, and so they only speak on that frequency of that crystal. So and I saw really great how they made them during World, a documentary made during World War II, if you will, on how they're made, importing crystals. I think it was from Brazil or wherever up into America, and making these crystal sets and put them in there. So like all of the radios in one company would all have the same set of crystals, so they could all talk to each other. And then the larger ones would have, 3 or 4 channels that they could click through that have 3 or 4 crystals, so that they could talk to the people of their company, or they can talk to battalion or something like that. So that, field radio set can only talk to a limited number of possible units. And so you couldn't what's the dial setting for, intelligence or something? No, they had no, like to tune it in. They didn't have tuning sets. They used crystals to maintain that. And I don't know, but I think that's also with a lot of the radios in vehicles, that 2 tanks from 2 different divisions can pull up to each other. They can't necessarily, if they're doing these crystal sets, they can't talk to each other necessarily, because they may have 4 or 5 channels, but those are all set up for their division, not to talk to a different division, if you will. So radio is incredibly useful and incredibly good for that platoon to talk within that platoon, and that platoon commander talk to the company commander, and the company commander talk to the battalion commander, maybe even another battalion commander, because he's talking to both the tank battalion commander that he's a member of, and maybe he can talk to the infantry battalion commander that his unit is supporting. It's that kind of thing that they could do. So to do greater networking, and also part of it is to keep the enemy from listening in. I mean, the enemy did, and it was known that they did at times tap into the field telephones, but that's harder to do. Not so. You know, if you have the right equipment, you find that the wire out in the field, it's easy to do, but it's not, you know, finding that, you know, one, having somebody has the right equipment, and two, finding the field telephone wires out there, you know, are going to be a hard matchup. It's more easy that you identify, oh, this isn't German field telephone cable, click, cut, you know, snip, and just cut it, as would be likely, sure. But if you did have an intel unit that had the right clip things to clip on it so that it doesn't cut the wires but just clips into them, and then you can listen to the enemy. But it's much harder. Again, on this thing, I think it was the Luftwaffe. But I forget. It was either the Luftwaffe, the Army, or the Navy, but I think it was the Luftwaffe. Most of the orders that were being sent out of Berlin were sent out via radio. So, and they were using the Enigma machines. And so, you know, as for coding. And so Bletchley Park, or other radio interception points were recording the communications and sending the encoded messages to Bletchley Park. I don't know exactly how that always worked, because I know they did have multiple listening stations around, and they did have a decoding set up in Malta during the Malta siege. I know there was one there. Very, very secret that it was there, and with very much of destroy everything before the Germans, if the Germans even start, or the Italians even start to land on, you know, somewhere on Malta, start to, you know, send out, you know, coded things are going to shit here, you know, and then destroy all of the workings and everything to make sure whoever taking it over, including all the paperwork and everything, you know, I don't know if somebody had the orders to kill all the operators or anything that extreme, but they wanted to definitely destroy any hint that the German Ultra was being decoded locally, and that was very, very few people on that island knew about that. But they did have one there during the sort of the height of the Malta siege. And another one was set back in Alexandria. Those are the two places that I know in the Mediterranean had one. May have had one out in Gibraltar, but I don't know. I just don't know. So those are the only two that I know of in the Mediterranean, at least until the Americans show up. You know, decoding German radio messages. But like I was saying, the Luftwaffe was sending out the orders via radio, but the different field positions, I think because they didn't necessarily have strong transmitters everywhere, routinely, I'm not saying absolutely, but routinely would reply or whatever back over telephones. So it was the same coded messages, but it was going over landlines, and the Allies had no real practical way to intercept that communication, at least not in any, you know, I don't know that, you know, obviously they could try to tap into some phone lines and somebody could take the information down and then try to get it back to Britain, but what use is that to do if you can't decode it? And if the Germans find out they're worried about taking our encoded messages, they have people over here listening to our encoded messages, they must have a way to decode them. So they wouldn't want to even have that out as a possible idea that the Germans were, or that the British were decoding the German Ultra. Well, Ultra is the British term for the Enigma code, you know, that they were decoding that, so they wouldn't want to do that. So that was sort of a limitation on understanding what was going on with the Luftwaffe. And this is also why, before Monty, a lot of the generals in the Western Desert campaign fighting, you know, against the Italians and then the Germans, but particularly with the Germans and Rommel is the general in the field, the highest ranking general in the field would get reports of what the Germans were going to do, and then they didn't do it. They do something entirely different. Well, they're told to hold the line and they withdraw, or you know, they're going to hold out here. And then the British prepare and get ready to attack, and there's nobody there. or the Germans aren't going to attack. Oh, no, they attack. That was because in Alexandria, they were decoding all of the messages that Hitler or the High Command were sending to Rommel. Rommel was then often ignoring orders, not, of course, reporting that he's disobeying orders, because he would probably be relieved, just going and doing what he's doing, and eventually High Command will find out that he didn't follow the orders, and if he's successful, well, oh well. If he's completely failing, well, then he's failing and going to be removed anyways from command. So, and they didn't tell the first field commander. I think Harold Alexander was the overall command at the time in Alexandria. The first field commander that they told that they had Ultra and that they were decoding it was Montgomery. So everybody else was just thinking, well, these intel guys are a bunch of fuck-ups. They don't know what they're talking about. I can't trust the intel. Instead of going and saying, hey, these are all the messages that we're getting, the German High Command is sending to Rommel. Take that for what you will. He has a history of disobeying orders, but here are his orders. And that way the commander in the field can make more rational decisions based upon, oh, Hitler's ordered him not to retreat. This is a really fucked up position. He's probably going to retreat, wherever, because we're about ready to flank him, and he realizes it. So we better push hard now, to follow up on him, even though we're weak. Or Hitler's ordering an attack. Well, he's probably out of fuel and low on ammunition, and we just sunk an ammunition ship and a fuel ship heading to North Africa, so he's probably low on all of that stuff, even more so he's probably not going to attack. You can come into that, make rational decisions based on that. So this is why giving these, radio intercepts and whatnot. And the Allies, because they're intercepting the Germans, are concerned about what the Germans are intercepting, because there's a huge amount of unencrypted radio traffic going on. Now, you may not understand it because they're, we're moving to point X or point Y on the map. If you don't have the maps, you don't know where they're talking about. But, it does matter, and the Germans were doing a job of it, but not necessarily a overly successful job. So, I wonder really, how does a defensive position of over, probably a start of the situation, over 30,000 men lose contact with higher command and get to the point that they no longer expect rescue. And if you don't know what's out in the snow, you very well may have a good chance, because you can look at this terrain, you very well may have a good chance at marching out, especially if you do it early. But if you know that this area is abuzz with motorized and cavalry units, and that marching like that, especially in the day, is just going to get you slaughtered, maybe it's better to be in, holding out in here, or just to, put out the white flag and get marched off into the gulag and hope that, 20%, 30% of your soldiers survive to the end, to be returned someday. It's that sort of bleak situation. Unfortunately, you can't, negotiate your surrender with the Soviets, saying that, well, we have lots of ammunition and food, and we can hold out for a week, and a lot of your men will die if you attack us, but we'll surrender early if you'll give us good conditions. Nah, you can't. The guy on the ground will say, oh, sure, we'll give you a nice heated barracks building in your prison camp. And then whatever the NKVD and people will do to you after that are not, up to the field commander that may or may not accept your surrender at particular terms. So yeah, that is really amazing. Germany, as from the earlier talks, by 44 has lost the war. It is only um, it is only the you're only right now, the only concern in my opinion is what are the conditions going to be when the war is over. Now, I have a couple of friends that are Germans, uh, and they both have different feelings about World War II. I think both of them have a great dislike for Hitler leadership. One of them, I don't, I wouldn't describe him as a Nazi. I'm sure some left wingers would, but he would be sort of a modern day right wing German, whatever that would be, And I'm sure he does. He doesn't come off. I just know him online and whatnot. He doesn't come off, and I'm not going to mention names here, as some sort of Nazi, but he is sort of like, yay, Wehrmacht. The Wehrmacht is fighting good, kind of thing. The Wehrmacht strong. Hooray. He's like I say, I don't know if you want to call him a conservative or what sort of right wing type German he is, but a lot of his criticisms of Hitler is just very poor leadership, and I don't think he's buying into the Nazi ideology so much, but he is, I would say, wouldn't mind an authoritarian, truly, the Kaiser's coming back, hooray, that's the kind, and I'm sort of putting words into his mouth and here, but that sort of wouldn't mind an authoritarian, any sort of government that he lives under. I've met people like this. I knew a guy, I'm not going to go into names or whatever, years ago, who was an American but ended up serving in another country's army, and to him, yeah, you want to dictator's fine. And I knew he wasn't bullshitting. Dictator's fine, I don't care, just good government. He wasn't a communist. He didn't want communism, but he wasn't like hooray for the American Constitution, hooray for liberty. No, dictator, fine, cool. So I've known people like that, and not agreeing with them, but I find them interesting to know. And I didn't know that particular guy very well. I just met him and talked to him one night, but in a bar. But I knew who he was because he wasn't bullshit, because there's other. I'm dancing around things here, but I knew who he was before I met him in person. Not anybody really famous, but was sort of a noted person. But to get back to my one German friend, he's a right winger, and Wehrmacht strong, Wehrmacht good. Hitler leads Germany into disaster, kind of talk. And the other one is not that, as far as I know. Again, people don't always say what they think. But definitely it's more, democracy good kind of thing, that stuff. Excuse me. But both of them are from East Germany. And the one, not the right winger, but the other one is a little older and remembers being in East Germany as a youth before unification. Close, not as old as I am, but closer to my age. And both of them are vehemently anti-communist because they lived under or just post communist East Germany. They're vehemently anti-communist, but the right winger is West Germany's more fucked up than East Germany in his views. The nuttiness of the West that he sees, he just finds it bewildering, shall we say. The right winger does, and the East German communists bad, but strongman authority good, like I say, that he feels. The other one is not looking, I don't think, to have another dictatorship in Germany, and sees that it's a real problem, but also sort of sees that I'm going to get to the point here. And again, I'm sharing my understanding of other people's views. I'm not expressing these as mine own. So before you rage quit because you disagree with some of the stuff, I just like to know interesting people. And like I say, these are interesting people. And if they listen to this, they'll know who I'm talking about. But I'm not going to use names because, again, I'm putting partially because I'm putting words into their mouth to some degree, and maybe not expressing it well. So. And if they don't need to identify themselves if they do listen to this, because I know who you guys are and you know who you are. The other one is, I would say more the non right wingers, more of like, I would say, a conservative type person, but both of them, I think to some degree, East Germany, especially the right winger who's an anti-communist, vehemently an anti-communist. East Germany wasn't all bad in that it was more a disciplined Germany versus the undisciplined West Germany. Now, so that's two peoples. One of them well remembers East Germany as a country, the Deutsches Demokratische Republik, the DDR. I remember it well, but from an outsider and going to, at that time, West Germany, or the Federal Republic of Germany, which all of Germany is now, and they didn't go into Berlin until after the fall of the wall, but shortly, as in within a year or two, I forget exactly from when it comes down, but shortly after the wall, when you most of the at least in the middle of the city, there was still wall on sort of the outskirts that hadn't been torn down yet, but most of the wall in the middle of the city had been fully torn down. But it was stark driving from one block to the other block to see how it changed between West Germany and East Germany. Standard sort of buildings, and even a few blocks into, not just like right on the former wall where no one was doing any work, but going deeper into East Berlin, the war damage that was still blatantly visible on buildings. And I don't mean just like the historic buildings or something, but just general buildings. World War II damage still very apparent, where it wasn't apparent at all in West Berlin. All of, if the building was that old, it was all patched up. And I don't mean apparent as in not patched up, kind of thing. Not that there was holes through the walls, but just chips and the whatever, and it just, the conditions were radically different between the two. And of course, I would rather be in West Germany for East Germany. But if you're looking at trying to say what is best for Germany, if you're 1944, get back to the game and the position where I started. If you're 1944 and you're the Germans, how do you want this war to end? And in understanding that you should, by at this point, understand that Germany is going to be on the losing end of the war. Do you try to immediately save lives, to immediately try to unconditionally surrender to both sides, or do you continue to try to fight effectively in the East, not letting disasters like this happen, but fight effectively and allow the Western powers in, whether you're just sort of half-heartedly fighting them because Hitler and the Nazis in the Central Command, or do you try to do the the anti-Hitler putsch, because it was more than just assassinating Hitler. There was the whole attempt to take over Berlin. Stauffenberg, that's the name I'm looking for. The Stauffenberg attempt on Hitler and the putsch in Berlin. Do you do that, and then some of those guys up there were deluding themselves that if they could get rid of Hitler and the Nazis in power, they could make peace in the West, withdraw entirely from the West, whether that's Norway or France or Italy, but continue to fight against the Soviets to keep the Soviets from coming in and whatnot. A separate piece of the West versus the East. Some were deluding that themselves. Or do you, keep fighting in the East until the Americans occupy enough of Germany, and then then race back or surrender to the Soviets. I don't know, but that's your only real conditions that you have. And it's sort of like, before I end this thing, it's sort of like once the Germans realize that they've lost the air war, then comes the Me-262, and Adolf Galland goes around to a bunch of basically PTSD'd pilots that are, good pilots that are known to be good but are no longer flying because PTSD or whatever you want to, war fatigue, if you will, and goes and talks to them and describes this new airplane. So they get these guys that are all volunteering to come to, fly in his new flying circus, because they do sort of harken back to the Red Baron's, flying circus. And these pilots are, I think, from everything I understand, and it could be post-war, explaining to themselves as well as trying to explain them out to the rest of the world, but I think heavily are just like, hey, we're shooting down American bombers and British, because these are daylight operations, shooting down American bombers just to save civilians. It's not like they're trying to win the war at this point. It's like, hell, those bombers are coming over and bombing German cities. The more we shoot down, the more civilians we save, and we are being successful. Kill-loss ratios in our jets, so it's being effective. So that I totally understand your motivation, even if you know for a fact and would admit privately amongst your friends that the war is effing lost. Why are we going up? Well, there's bombers coming over today, and they're going to be bombing German cities, and we're just trying to shoot down the bombers. I get that. I mean, that's something I would get, even if you know the war is lost, and even if you hope for a quick end of the war. Why you would go up and shoot down American bombers that are targeting, whether blatantly the cities, but how close are you getting to the factories? And so many factories are in or near cities. You can't help but to hit civilian targets, whether you're trying to or not. But looking at that, so yeah, that there are very good reasons why to fight late into the war. It's just how it's done, and this is, obviously a disaster from the general German thing. So I want to thank Tim, Strongarm, Niagara, Timothy, Sir Toyjet, and Gary for support over on Patreon. But what I really ask everybody to do is, if you can hit that like button, I presume if you've made it this far and I've got your subscription, but do that too, and post a comment. Actually, just say "Hi Gamer" below, or you can do a more in-depth post if you want. But posting really helps with the algorithm. So if you can just post "Hi Gamer" or "Good Game Gamer" or "GG Gamer" or whatever it is below, that really helps the algorithm, helps these videos go, because the more views a particular game gets, the more I'm going to play that game. So if you made it this far and you want to come in and do that, I would greatly appreciate that. That's all that I ask you to do for my entertaining you, hopefully, and hopefully informing you as well. So see you next time for more historical gaming.